Good morning. Okay, good morning. Wasn't sure if that started the recording or not. So you're here for e-learning Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. I'm assuming that you have found your way to the biology agenda because this is where I've posted the video. We are going to take notes. Intro to Genetics with a Note Guide. And then there's a learning check which will go over those notes. So, do you have to listen to this video? No. Do you have to take the learning check? Yes. This is how I'm going to confirm your attendance. Do you have to Zoom? Absolutely not. If you are having any issues with your Wi Fi, feel free to just take your notes and then do the learning check. If you have any questions, message me on Schoology and I will be happy to answer you. So you picked up the note guide packet yesterday, assuming you were in class. If you were not in class, please click the note guide found here, right here in the agenda. Here you go. Make a copy of this and follow along as we watch and go through the Introduction to Genetics presentation. Here is the presentation. All about Mendel. If you so desire, you can read. Yes, read on the CK12 online text since you do not have the book with you. Not anyone has asked about it for the entire year. This is a really nice clip talking about Mendel and summarizing what he did. Do you have to watch it? No. Would I recommend it? Yes. Okay, moving forward. The scientific study of heredity is genetics. And of course, the father of genetics is Gregory Mendel. That would fit in right there. Okay, moving forward. Why? Why do we talk about pea plants? Why are you going to hear about pea plants oh so often? One, they grow quickly and reproduce lots of offspring. Compare that to an elephant who has to carry a baby for like 18 months and it's only one baby. Or humans, again, mostly one baby, 9 months. It's easy to control a pea plant breeding. Just try telling a human you have to breed with that person right there across the room. Yeah, that's not going to go over so well, especially considering you're at home. Yeah, okay. And there's 7 traits that were easy to see, and they were easily dominant recessive. If you were in class yesterday, remember how I was talking about brown eye, blue eyes? Sure, that sounds easy. But then we have green eyes and hazel eyes, and then the different shades of the different eye colors. And then I even mentioned that there were 2 different ways to get blue eyes. Yeah, pea plants, so much easier. Okay. Mendel's pea plant experiments. Pea plants were also nice because they were produced by self pollination. We didn't have to find a boy pea plant and a girl pea plant because they are true breeding and they have male and female plants in their flower as a perfect flower. So because they are true breeding and they can reproduce by self pollination, they produce offspring that, unless you cross pollinate or they have some bees coming around cross pollinating, the offspring are true breeding. They are virtually identical to themselves. Again, something you don't see in animals very often. It takes a lot of work to do that in animals. Okay. Mendel's pea plant experiments. How did he stop them from self pollinating then, right? If they normally self pollinate? Simple enough. He cuts off the male parts. That's right. The male parts, snip, snip. It's that easy. And then he took the male parts from the one plant and he would use a little paintbrush and he would take those male parts and he would paint those onto a different plant. Okay. And if you watch the video, you have seen him talk about something like that. Okay. So this is a perfect flower. This is a pea plant. These pieces here would be the male part. It has the pollen on the ends. He would snip those off before the pollen became mature. And so normally the pollen would go into the top end of the stigma, and it would work its way down and find the ovals, the ovum, the eggs. For those of us who like to keep it simple. And then you would get the pollinated seeds. Okay? So if you snip before the pollen is mature, you don't get fertilized eggs. It is that simple. Okay? Reminder, a gene is a discrete unit of DNA which will encode a specific trait. We talked about traits yesterday. Those are the characteristics that we are going to talk about. Whether it be the yellow pea, the wrinkled pea, the tall plant, the short plant, whatever. Those are my traits. A hybrid. This is when we cross things of different traits versus a purebred, meaning they are homozygous, or for whichever trait. Talked about homozygous yesterday as well. Okay, P. P is the parent generation. No matter what generation we start with, P is my parent generation. F1, first generation, actually is Latin for filial. Don't care if you know if it's filial, as long as you know it's first generation. Therefore, F2 is filial 2. That is why it's not S, because we're going with Latin, and Latin is filial. So the second generation would be the filial 2 generation. Okay? Sidebar, we're talking about genes and alleles and so forth. You'll often hear people say that they have a gene for something. Hey, I got my DNA tested. I have the gene for breast cancer. I have the gene for diabetes. For one, you need multiple genes for diabetes. But anyway, if someone says that they have the gene for diabetes, it's the allele for diabetes, but it is so easy to say the wrong thing because, it's just easier to say that. I have the gene for brown eyes. No, you have the allele for brown eyes. So anyway, just a reminder. Next one. Principle of dominance. So there's a principle is kind of like a law, but laws have more math behind them. A principle is just something that you've observed and can say, this is true. So, in a principle of dominance, this is like the definition of what dominance is, which we kind of talked about the definition of dominance of yesterday. If I cross two true breeding plants, a tall plant and a short plant, and I see in generation 1, F1, I only see one trait. That trait is a dominant trait. That is the principle of dominance. One trait is going to hide the other trait. That is a principle of dominance. Most traits can be explained as being either dominant or recessive. Sure. If an organism is dominant, that is the allele that will be observed. Brown eyes. If an organism has a recessive trait, it will not always show it. Talked about that. I am carrying the trait for blue eyes. I know this because my father has blue eyes. I can prove it because my daughter has blue eyes. But I do not have blue eyes. I have hazel eyes, thanks to my mom's brown eyes. And some wandering modifying gene, which we also talked about yesterday. So anyway, I do not show the recessive trait. To exhibit a recessive trait, the organism must have two recessive alleles. In this case, this was tall in the pea plant, big T, and little d. Okay, moving forward. How did Mendel prove that the recessive traits were still there? One of the thoughts at the time of Mendel is that when you had two organisms get together, that the stronger trait won and the other trait just disappeared. Well, he proved that wasn't true because he simply allowed the F1 plants to self-pollinate. He left them alone. Easy peasy. I'm going to leave this part of the garden alone and let them self-pollinate and see what happens in the next generation. And guess what? The recessive allele returned. It didn't disappear. It didn't go away permanently. It was still there. That leads us to the segregation principle. So remember, a principle just states something that is observed as a fact, whereas as a law you can prove with math. Okay, so the principle for segregation says the alleles separate at some point in time and can therefore be taken away from the other allele. Tall for short, blue eyes from brown eyes. I don't have blue eyes. My dad does. My daughter does. It was separated during the process of eggs and sperm creation. Okay? Which brings us back to meiosis. We're back in semester 1. Remember that germ cells, which are in your gonads, and if you are males, your gonads are your testes, and if you are female, your gonads are in your ovaries, and you will produce sex cells based on what you are, biologically speaking, again. So, sperm or eggs. All other cells in your body are somatic cells. So here is an organism who is heterozygous for round and wrinkled. So we're back to the pea plant. They can produce either round or they can produce wrinkled gametes. One or the other. And then we can produce all these variations in the F1 generation. This is what it would look like if we did not do a Punnett square. And this is why we do Punnett squares. It gets kind of confusing. Mendel assumed the dominant trait masked or hid the recessive allele in the F1 generation. And that brings us back to practice problems. If you want to do the practice problem, go right ahead. I did not set these up further than that. That is the end of what we need to go over today. What do you need to do next? Go to the learning check. Take the learning check. This confirms your attendance and will give you a grade for today. If you did not complete the genetics practice from yesterday, it is due tomorrow. And tune in for tomorrow. If we are not here tomorrow, it's basically set up, some more notes. There's a vocabulary that will be due on Friday. Whether or not we are here or not on Friday, I have no idea. Have a good rest of your day. If I don't see you during Zoom, talk to you later. Bye.